So you're considering Microsoft Fabric, but you don't have anything in Azure right now. What's the best way to go setting this up? Now, one of the things that we recommend to the customers is setting up an Azure Landing Zone. And so a question we have around customers who are new to Azure is, well, do I need one of these for Microsoft Fabric? After all, Microsoft Fabric is just a SaaS service, so why do I need to go to the trouble of setting that up? So in this video, I want to take you through, what is an Azure Landing Zone, very simply, and some of the pros and cons that you want to go through and some considerations to help you make that decision. Importantly, when you provision Fabric, you're actually provisioning services inside of Azure. So it is certainly an important thing to be mindful of as you go forward. So let's look at what is an Azure Landing Zone. So an Azure Landing Zone, once you've provisioned an Azure tenancy, is simply a pre-configured environment with a lot of best practices already established. Those best practices and things that get configured are around the security that you need to apply for your organization, the network setup, to allow access in or out, connect with your on-premises networks, for access controls for people to use and provision and manage and govern your Azure tenancy, and then the cost management that goes along with that. Really, it's the foundation and structure for keeping everything secured and managed inside of Azure. And for organizations who make an adoption to go to cloud and move their workloads there, it becomes really critical very quickly to be able to all those things, make sure it's secure and make sure it's well managed, including not only the technical management, also then the cost management as well. So it is a really big important consideration. But when we go back to Fabric as it allows us to turn the service on, why do we want to potentially do that? So first is strong governance and security. So a landing zone provides a really well-defined structure for having the right security, compliance, and governance in place, making sure that Microsoft Fabric is managed with enterprise standards right from the start. Second is scalability and flexibility. So even if Fabric is the one workload right now, a landing zone makes it easier to add new workloads in the future without reworking your setup, especially if you're going to be expanding beyond Fabric. Third is the cost management. So landing zones enable better cost control with predefined budgets, resource tagging, and monitoring, helping to avoid unexpected expenses. And so you can apply that same principles that we apply for any Azure workload to the run costs of Fabric as well. The fourth is the optimized networking and identity. So landing zones offer centralized network and identity configurations. So your Fabric data and its integrations and the access are secure and efficient. And the fifth reason why we should consider a landing zone for Fabric is around the operational consistency. So having a landing zone standardizes your Azure environment, so with your existing IT infrastructure, so processes like monitoring, backups, and patching, streamlined and consistent, reducing overall operational complexity. Now we looked at why we should think about an Azure landing zone for Fabric. Let's look at the argument, why wouldn't we consider using an Azure landing zone? So certainly, setting up a landing zone has initial complexity and setup cost beyond just turning the tenancy on. It takes a bit of time, a bit of planning as well, and then investment to do that yourself or engage someone to help you with that. And it may feel very unnecessary if it's your only workload that you're planning on, at least for the next little while. There is going to be resource overheads as well. So extra resources like monitoring, additional networking, additional security tools does add to the cost of just running the Fabric service itself. So it may outweigh some of the benefits, particularly if you're just starting out or maybe piloting Fabric itself. You may feel there's potentially going to be over-engineering your Azure environment. So with only Fabric, landing zone may be more structured than you really do need, possibly creating additional administrative overhead rather than the value you're expecting to get, particularly if you're not going to be planning any future workloads into Azure. And lastly is around the maintenance and management. Landing zones do require ongoing management to keep, make sure it's in check with the right governance and security, and all your cost settings are kept up to date. So it's extra administrative work while on batch. With Fabric, there is some there you need to do and make any adjustments over time. So let's now look at considerations for what should you do. So when I think about different types of customers that I work with, those that have Azure already, have already existing landing zone, or maybe they're having to provision Azure because they want to use Fabric, so it's the first time using Azure. There's very different sorts of requirements, and that will depend really on your organizational needs. A couple of things to think about is, like, do I need secure Fabric from the public internet? So while you can provision Fabric, it is secure by access roles. If you want to limit that down to your private networks, then Azure Landing Zone and the right network configuration would be a good thing to consider. Do you have additional compliance requirements? So if you're in a regulated industry, then you may need to think about, do I have the right protections to meet any compliance certification regulatory requirements to be able to achieve that? And the other question to ask is, will I be adding additional workloads to Azure? If you think you're going to be doing that in the short to medium term, then getting things set up now could help you in good stead for when you do take that migration modernization journey. And lastly, I certainly recommend seeking advice from your Microsoft partner to help assist you on that journey. If you're based in Australia, I can certainly help you with the organization I work for with that, if that is of interest. So hopefully that provides an overview on the question, like, do I need an Azure Landing Zone for Microsoft Fabric? And hopefully that was helpful and allow you to think about those pros and cons as you take your journey with Fabric.